Okay. This is, let's see, what's the date today? August 18th, 1987. Now, what story were you starting to tell me? Oh, about when you had a sore throat and your mother went to the doctor?
Oh, yeah, and she got the doctor because she didn't like sore throats. It's supposed to be you could have anything with a sore throat. And I had to report it to the doctor if you were worried at all. So he was going to put me in the hospital, and she said, "You know how I feel about the hospitals." And he said, "This is very important, Mrs. McCabe. I have to report it. I have to report a sore throat. And I'll get into trouble. And you'll get into trouble if I don't. So it isn't that you have to go to hospital, right? So she'll have to go right away. We'll have to just find out what I think and stuff like that. But I think she should go. She's not going. That's all. So you just run along, doctor. I don't need you anymore. Just run along." She said, "I have a room that there's nothing in it. It's only used for the kids. They play in it, they do anything they like in it, and they clean up after it." She said that's the room she'd go to, and I'll be with her all the time, and I'll get one of the older girls to stay home and look after the others, and cook or do anything, but I'll stay here till you find out for sure. I'll stay with her and keep her in that room, and I know where I can get a big crib." A big-sized crib, you know.
How old were you?
Oh, maybe about 5 or 6 years old or something like that. And she did. And it came to pass that everybody in every household almost was going, somebody had a sore throat and somebody had a sore throat. So they got a little bit scared, you know. And somebody went into the hospital, and it wasn't somebody who wasn't as scared as my mother about hospitals. And so it turned out it was nothing serious at all. It was a drain on the hill that needed a very good cleaning out. And that's where the trouble was coming from.
The bacteria in the drain?
Yeah.
So you had a bacterial infection?
Yeah.
So what did they do to treat it?
Oh, I can't remember that. I never remember treatments. But my mother stayed in the room with me until it was all straightened out about what it was and things like that. And she used to tell that story to a lot of people, you know, as we were growing up, and she says, that one and this one, she used to call me, and that one's never sick. That's what worried me. She's never sick, and I never was sick. I was the littlest, skinniest one of the bunch. And so when we grew older, we used to sit around the fire in the winter time, and the wind was howling from the North Sea, and tell stories about when we were younger, you know. I said, you know, I was quite old and I grew up and I thought my name was this one or that one. And my mother used to sit and just laugh her head off. She'd be knitting all the time, you know. And I said, honest, I thought this one was my name, this one. Now this one, she used to say about me. She's the littlest one of the bunch and she's never sick.
Great.
And I wasn't, you know.
So then, what other things can you remember when you were a little bit older?
Well, I remember having a real happy time until I was 12 years old, and we moved from the hill. And I was screaming and yelling, and I didn't want to go. I don't want to leave this hill. And my mother used to sit down and talk with us and say, but down at the bottom of the street, there's not nice people coming in, so that the whole thing will spread. So we have to get away from this place. None of us wanted to leave the hill. It's a pretty place. And nice people that in our part of the hill. Nice people lived there.
You
And
must have had a real big house.
we had two houses made into one.
You'd have to for all those kids.
Well, my father got the job as he had a good job working for the city gas, but he got the job of being what you call overseer to keep an eye on the property and see that it was well taken care of. But he didn't have to do any work. But he had to. Maybe emergency put a pane of glass in for somebody that was broken, and there wouldn't be a man ready for until the next day or something like that. Little bitty jobs like that. Put a washer on or a faucet or something. But we were his helpers. We were a bit better overseers than him, you know. Keep off that grass. You're not supposed to walk on that grass. You walk on the walk. And go down to the lower and play. Yeah, he had a bunch of helpers.
So there were lots of houses that he was looking out for, or the land there?
Yeah, no, it was just this one. It was like an avenue. It was private. It wasn't a straight through. But
a dead end?
And, well, it wasn't a dead end because it led to another hill. But that whole walk, and it wasn't a walk, it was a wide sidewalk. It was all paved. One side was the houses and the other side was all the cellars. And then the green, as we called it, the green, that was, you went up in the middle of the cellar line, and you went up steps and you were on the green. It was very beautiful.
That was the lawn?
Yeah, like a lawn, yeah. Mm-hmm. And on the top of that, see, that was on the hill. The hill was pretty steep. On the very top, there was the wash houses for the people. You know, for doing your wash. And you could bleach your sheets or things like that, or anything that you wanted bleaching on the grass. But no play. No children playing. Play down in the lower greens, you know.
So were there upper greens and lower greens?
Yeah. And it was well taken care of, you know, and good tenants. We all knew each other.
So on this street or this avenue, how many people, how many families lived there on the hill?
Oh gosh, I couldn't remember now.
Like 10 or more?
Well, more. There was the row of houses on the lower row, and we had two of them, and we were close to the hill. And then there was upstairs, it was like verandas, and there was three flights of upstairs tenants. It's a lot of tenants.
So these tenants were in individual houses?
Yeah. Not apartments. And so we had two of those houses, and they knocked the walls down and made it into one.
So there was enough room for everybody?
Oh, lots of room. We had that room that wasn't even occupied, you know. Came in handy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you told me about how big the kitchen was.
Oh yeah, it was a big kitchen. Everybody came into the kitchen. It was just like, we had no dining room. We just had a large living room. Places were bigger in those days than they are today. And a bathroom, and this big kitchen, and a front room, the living room. What did we call it? Parlor. Very seldom used a parlor. Even with company, they all liked the kitchen.
You had a big table in the kitchen?
Mm.
Did you have a real big table?
Oh, yeah. We had a table that was a friend of my father's made it when they got married. And he was what do you call people who build furniture?
Cabinet maker?
Yeah, something like that.
Carpenter?
Carpenter.
Finished carpenter? Or
yeah. Well, he made the table, and it was the biggest table anybody'd ever seen. And it had leaves that went to the floor. And when that table was up, That table was big. It was oval when it was up, when the leaves were up.
So could everybody fit at it? 15 people?
Oh, yeah, plenty of room.
Plenty room for 15.
That was how big the kitchen was.
So it was bigger, much bigger than our table in the dining room.
Oh, yeah. Extra big.
I guess so.
Yeah, because he made it special.
Mm-hmm.
And so they used to kid it about my father's friend. He must have known that he was going to have a big family. And he brought it on them or something. Yeah. So everybody gathered around that table. But it wasn't always up. You didn't have room to put it up all the time. But there was always lots of room for people who come in, and everybody came in the kitchen first. And then certain people would come in the afternoon to visit my mother, and she'd take them into the parlour. And I used to fill the cart when I got a little older, and I used to fill the tea cart in there.
Did you make the tea?
Yeah, I used to be pretty handy when I was young. Because we left the hill when I was 12.
So then when you left the hill, what kind of house did you go to?
Well, a lot of them got married, you see.
A lot of your
Older
brothers
ones.
and sisters.
And so the family was getting less and less, So it wasn't as big a house, but it was different, We went up onto the main street and different altogether. It's a nice house though, but I never liked it like it. I always remembered the hill. We all did.
You talked about it every time you saw each other?
Spring Hill.
Spring Hill.
And the part that we had was Eden Bank. Pretty names.
Yeah, it is pretty. When you were back in Scotland, did you go there?
The last time I was back, I wanted someone to take me to Spring Hill. Says there's no Spring Hill anymore. I said, what? There's no Spring Hill anymore. I said, how could they ever straighten out that hill? It was so big, so high. Said they can do it nowadays.
You mean they leveled it?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
No,
That's terrible.
there was no such thing as Spring Hill.
Huh. They just leveled it right down.
Yes, they just level it and build up on it and whatever they do nowadays. I said it wouldn't be the same anyway.
No.
No.
Okay.
Everything goes, everything goes to pot one time or another. So, it's the story of the hill. Vancouver first. We travelled right across Canada from St. John's, New Brunswick to Vancouver. And I think it took a week.
You're kidding.
Yeah, a little over a week.
What kind of a boat was it?
It was a train.
Oh, you took a train. Wait a minute. Where'd you go from New Brunswick? Oh, I see.
We crossed the Atlantic Ocean.
To New
we arrived
Brunswick.
at New Brunswick.
On the east coast of Canada.
Uh-huh.
And then you took a train to the west coast.
All the way, yeah. Through the Rockies and everything.
Ooh, is it pretty?
Oh, beautiful. And the train was right on the edge of the Rockies. And you looked down and said, whoo,
What time of year was it?
Early in April.
Oh, so it was real
The
green.
first week in April.
Real pretty and green.
Yeah. And we didn't stay very long in Vancouver because we were bound for Victoria, British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, my Auntie Mary was expecting us. See?
Now, how long had she been there?
Oh, quite a few years. She had left long time ago, her and her first husband, when they were married first, and lived in Peterborough, Ontario.
So what year would it have been that she went to Seattle? Or Peterborough first?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, Debbie.
Like 1910?
Oh, no, long years. When I was a young girl, I left Spring Hill in when I was 12 years old at home in Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
and Auntie Mary came to visit us when we lived in Spring Hill with a little girl
From Peterborough?
from Canada.
So maybe at the turn of the century she was there?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
And so then her husband died in Peterborough.
Mm-hmm.
No, I said Peterborough, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went out to Victoria, and I think that's where she met Pete, her second husband.
So why'd she go there? Do you know?
Oh, I guess just a
Job or a
change or
change or
something.
something?
She had 2 children,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe wanted to get the warmer climate or something like that.
Yeah.
So then eventually, Auntie Mary was there and moved over to Seattle, her and Uncle Pete, and lived. They just lived in an apartment. They didn't have a home there. She had a beautiful home in Victoria, and that was where that I sneaked in from Canada to the United States from Auntie Mary's. She was so scared. She tried so hard to get me to stop. You
Now,
talk about standing on your own 2 feet. I had plenty of gumption,
Really?
I'll tell you.
What year was that you snuck over?
The same year.
So what year was
1923.
that? 23.
Mm-hmm. And she said, I had her take me down to the immigration and everything, and she said, but the court is closed here. When it's closed in Britain, it's closed in Canada, because Canada belonged to Britain then. And I said, oh, no, it can't be. Come on, let's go to the immigration. And of course it was closed. She knew what she was talking about, and I wouldn't believe her. I said, I'm going anyway, Auntie Mary. I'm going to sneak in. She says, you'll never make it. You are crazy, she said. And she wanted me to stay there, and she said, you talk about somebody looking after you all the time. She said, you don't even have to work if you stay with me. But my sister Jess would have to work.
Why?
I don't know. She wasn't going to keep her, but she's going to keep me.
You must have been a favorite.
I guess so. And we weren't there that long when we sneaked into Seattle.
How did you do it?
Well, you see, we were getting a little help from my sister, my younger sister, the one that was drowned. Mabel. And
Now, where was Mabel?
she was in Seattle.
Oh.
She had 3 sisters in Seattle.
So Mabel, Ruby, and Rachel were already in Seattle,
Oh.
legally.
Eh?
Legally, with
Oh,
custody.
yeah. Legally is right. And they didn't know anything about, like Rachel and Ruby. I didn't get in touch with them at all. I don't want to talk to them at all. But Maeve, she was a venturesome person,
Mhm.
you know. And I talked to her on the phone, and she says, I hope you know what you're doing. I hope you know that you're taking an awful big chance. And I said, I know. I'm willing to take the chance. And so she told me all what to do. She said, you can't bring too many clothes with you. You bring a small suitcase, and you're just going to stay here for the weekend. And you're going to visit your sister, and your sister got a different name from she really has, and she's got a different address from she really has. And that's that. And just take the night boat. Victoria, British Columbia is an island.
Mhm.
Take the night boat and come off, and you'll get off there about 9 o'clock in the morning. And just act as natural as you can, and that's that. You and Jess, and we'll take care of Al. Because Al said he was going too. He wasn't going to stay in Victoria. It was a beautiful town, but it wasn't what we were looking for.
Mhm.
We were looking for a big city,
Mhm.
you know? So we made it, and the first thing that happened to us, we
Now, did you and Al and Jess all do it together?
got, Jess and I,
Just you and Jess. Now, where was Al?
Al stayed until he got,
The quota was lifted.
no, he
or
stayed
whatever.
until he got directions from Mabe.
Oh.
What to do. They came in a car to take him.
It's like a dime novel.
That's true.
I
Every
know.
word,
I
every
know.
word
It
of it.
just cracks me up, though.
Yeah. And
So you went on the boat.
and we had the boat ride in the night time, and even enjoyed it. wasn't even scared. Think about it. Gee.
You were crazy, huh?
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you. And here's when we got when we got the first streetcar that we could find, and we asked the driver, and he was all grouch, and said, "Will you please take us to 7th Avenue?" And we had this suitcase, and it was crowded, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. You know what that is on a streetcar, any city? And this was First Avenue. So you can remember First Avenue, it's near the dock. And he kept on doing this, and I'm holding the money out like this because I didn't know what the money was, and holding the money. And he kept on doing this, and it was a money box, you know. And I said, "How much?" And so he must have told us and put the money in. "Would you please let us off at 7th Avenue?" And he never grunted or something. And you know, he took us down the line. Took us, there's nobody in the streetcar but Jess and I. I was sitting there, and I said, "This is a grouchy bugger." I said, he's taking us to the end of the line. So the new driver was waiting to come on, and they were exchanging whatever they have to do. And we stepped off and waited. And I says to this driver, I did all the talking. I said, "I wanted 7th Avenue, and he took us to the end of the line, but I don't know where 7th Avenue is." He says, "Did you ask for 7th Avenue? Did you ask him for 7th Avenue?" And this wife walking away. And I said, "Yes." He said, "It's 1 block from where you come on." "No, where did you come on?" I said, "We came from the docks." He says, "1 block from where you come on." And he looked after that one, and he said,
Shook his head, huh?
yeah. He says, "Get back on the car," and he said, "I'll take you back there." Wouldn't let us put any more money in the box.
Oh, that was nice.
The difference, eh?
Yeah.
So we were going to Rachel's. Of course, we had her address and everything, the real address.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of, we should have got a streetcar to take you up the hill, and we didn't. We walked, and it was such a long walk.
Plus uphill.
Uphill, yeah. As the avenues run uphill and the streets run parallel, like across each other. Pike Street and Pine Street and all these streets, you know. And Rachel wasn't expecting us. Now, I don't know if we did tell her, but she wasn't expecting us, and we didn't know we had the right house or not, and it wasn't a very nice looking house. I said, "It can't be." I said, "This can't be the place," but it's the right address. It's run down. It's poor. And finally I saw her, and I said, "There she is! That's her! This is it! This is..."
And she didn't know you were coming.
No.
Mabel didn't tell her.
I don't think so.
Mabel probably was afraid to tell her.
Yeah, there was something, she wasn't expecting us, but she was just, she was a wonderful person, you know. And inside the house was so different from the outside.
Yeah.
She was clean as a whistle, and everything was so nice. But she had a lousy husband.
Rachel did?
Yeah. We couldn't live with her.
He wouldn't let you.
No, he wouldn't let us. She said that he wouldn't have us. He wouldn't let us. Boys, I got to clear my throat.
Yeah, go ahead.
We all got together.
You went to visit Ruby?
Yeah. And we were all crying like crazy, you know.
How long had it been since you'd all seen each other?
Well, that was 1923, and Ruby, I saw Ruby in 1920. She went in 1920.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel went there in 1912.
Oh, so it's been a long time for Rachel. Yeah.
Yeah.
11 years.
Yeah.
That's quite a reunion.
So when we went to Rachel's, you know, she went and run the tub, and she had us take a bath and everything, because the old man wasn't there at the time, and made something to eat, and we talked a lot. And then we went over to Ruby's at supper time,
Mm-hmm.
and then we stayed at Ruby's overnight, but it was all planned that we were going to stay where Mabel was staying, and she was living with her girlfriend's family. They had a big house in West Seattle.
Hmm.
And we stayed at that house. And then there was two families in that house, like the daughter and her husband stayed in the lower part, and the older lady, there was no old man, it was the older lady. She stayed in the top part, and so there was plenty of room for us. And there was a garden party on a Sunday, and the first Sunday that we were there, it was great for tea parties, like garden parties. It was a beautiful house, a beautiful lawn, and there was groups sitting here and groups sitting all around, and I was listening to everybody sitting around, and my ears, I could hear very good then. And I was hearing an awful lot about Alaska. And I said to myself, sounds great. So after the party was over, I told my sister Maeve, I said, I'm going to Alaska. She says, you can't go to Alaska, it's not for you. I says, you go to Alaska, I go to Alaska. She went to Alaska, see? She'd been in Alaska 2 different years. And she didn't want me to go. Didn't want us to go. She said, we'd never make it. And I says, oh. I says to Jess, the heck with her, I'm going to Alaska. So we went down the next morning, on a Monday morning, to the docks, and we looked at the places over, and I saw one, Horseshoe Bay. I said, that sounds great.
Horseshoe Bay.
I see the horseshoe, and a big horseshoe, you know, Horseshoe Bay written on it. So we went in there and we signed up for Alaska and told a bunch of lies about knowing all about the fish, and we just came from Scotland. So they fell for it because we just came from Scotland. They thought that we were telling the truth. We never knew anything about fish but how to eat them, you know. But I don't know how my sister Jess made out as good as she did, but she was great. She was really great with the fish.
What'd she do with them?
Oh, well, you had a certain kind of a knife, and you inserted the knife into the gill of the fish, and the head come right off, and the gut came right with it, and you threw that to the right of you in a place for the junk, and you hit the bin end there with the fish that was supposed to be ready for the barrel, you know. Well, I just didn't have that knack with that left hand, that left arm or something, and I was throwing them and so I would take a little time off and go look at my sisters, and I says, I'm throwing my fish in your bin. And she was an awful laugher. She used to get some hearty laughing when she says, you're throwing them in the floor. She says, that's where you're throwing them. And so the boss would be watching me for a few days, you know, and I wasn't getting anywhere at all. So he came and talked to me. He didn't come up, but he waited for me and he talked to me. Said he had a job. He says, you're not getting along very well with the fish, are you? And I said, no. I'm going down below. That's what they say when you're going. I says, I'm going down below. I says, I can't do that at all. I haven't got the knack, and I said, I can't use my left arm right, you know. He says, I have a job for you if you would like to tie it. I said, what's that? He said, waiting tables. I said, oh yeah, I can do that. Anybody can do that. He says, I don't know about anybody, but he says, it's not easy, but I think you could do it. So I said, yeah, that'd be fine.
Then what did you waited on tables?
I waited on tables all the time, and I just loved it. Just loved it. And I loved up there, and I thought it was great. I hated to come down. But we stayed, the staff stayed until the end of November, and then the crew went down in October, as the fishing was all over. And the staff stayed, and we stayed, and I said, my sister can't go down with the crew because she wants to stay with me. Now, if she has to go down, I have to go down. I said, oh no, we need you. And the boss said, but she can stay, but we can't pay her. And I said, she doesn't want to be paid. So
So you stayed how long?
till the end, almost the end of November. It was the last chance to get the ship down before the ice, you know. And it was dark, you know, in the morning and dark at night, and just very few daylight hours. Oh,
Not yet.
no, not yet. And it was so nice. It was just great with that little bunch to wait on. And Mary was the cook then. The other cook had been fired. That's another story that I don't want to tell you about.
Well, we'll save that one for another time.
Yeah, that's a private one.
A private one? Ooh.
And Mary was her and I made friends on the ship coming up. This girl, and when she was the cook, her and I got along just great, you know. She used to call me Belladonna.
Belladonna.
Yeah. She got me to stay on my lunch hour, not lunch hour, but after after breakfast was all through, and I had cleaned up, washed the dishes and everything, to go upstairs above the cookhouse. And there was rooms up there, and rest there if I wanted to. But sometimes I would, and sometimes I would go home, and my cabin was at the very end of the boardwalk, the very last one. And it was close to a mile to walk, but it was nice. And wash out a few things or something like that, you know. And I liked the walk. And it was just beautiful up there. It was so pretty. And the hills that went up. The cookhouse was set on a hill that was like Jacob's ladder walking up there to the cookhouse, the dining room, you know. And the crew was just a bunch of nicest men that you could ever want to meet, you know. There was one bunch of women that were Norwegians and Swedes, and they were very unfriendly. We couldn't get close to them, so we gave up on them. They used to talk in their own tongue, and they could talk English, you know. And so we said, well, we'll just leave them alone. Jess and I used to sit there and make funny sounds like Scotch, and there was this Scotsman next to us that wasn't really, he was born in Scotland, but he came to this country when he was a baby. His mother brought him. And him and his wife and his sister and brother, younger than him, all lived in the cabin next to us. And so we were very close to them. And him being a Scot, his mother and father were from Glasgow. And he was a good guy, and he said, why don't you sit and talk in the real broad words, you know, because my mother and father have a few of them, and they'll think that they won't know what you're saying. Give them back what they're giving you. We couldn't sit at the long table in the social hall with them. We just felt left out, you know, because they excluded us from everything. And they were very ignorant, really ignorant. And they looked it too. So that was the only bunch that we just didn't make out with at all. But the rest of them and the men, they were all very nice. So we used to sit and say all kinds of silly words like och and wach, juch and all that kind, and laugh our heads off, really laugh, you know? Just really laugh, and they thought we were laughing at them, we were laughing at each other.
Whatever happened with the immigration people from getting over into Seattle? No one ever asked a question or anything?
Oh, that was, you know, some days there was no fish, very few days, but once in a while they didn't get a catch, and so it was a holiday, and the weather was beautiful.
Now this is in Alaska or Seattle?
In Alaska. And so I said to Jess, come on, we'll go up those steps, those wide steps made from logs, made from trees, really, you know, like trees, and they made steps up to this woods way up there. And so we walked up there one day, and we started walking through the woods, and it started getting kind of twilight, you know. And I says, we better get back. We walked for miles. And I says, we better get back. I says, when it gets dark, the bears come out. And Jess says to me, you didn't tell me anything about the bears. And I said, oh yeah, there's bears up here. And she said, oh, come on. And she started to run, and I couldn't keep up with her. And she never stopped. And I ran and ran. She ran for miles, and she never stopped, and I'm like this, you know, and she had long legs, and she's running from the bears. And we got to the steps, and we got to steps, and it was okay, we're at the steps, we could see that cookhouse way over there, over the creek, and so we both laid down like this on our backs, and we just couldn't really get any breathing, but we lost our breath altogether, you know, and she was mad at me because I didn't tell her about the bears before.
Did you
And
see
I
bears when you
No,
were
but
there?
somebody told me there was bears up there, and they came out after dark.
There are bears up there.
Yeah, the brown bears or something, you know. So she was mad at me because I didn't tell her about the bears. I'd have never got her up there if I'd told her about the bears.
Bears. So, what happened, though, in Seattle before you went to Alaska?
About immigration?
Mhm.
Oh, they never found that.
They never found any.
No.
So it was a perfect plan.
Well, it was a perfect plan until I bummed it all up when I came here. And Grandpa and I went to Niagara Falls, and I had a girlfriend who lived in close to it, you know, close to Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, and my sister's girlfriend lived on the American side, Niagara Falls on the American side.
Mm-hmm.
So Grandpa and I went up there for 2 weeks.
From where?
From here. We went to Niagara Falls from Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed for 2 weeks, and that's all he could stay, and I stayed for a month. So during that month, Lottie, my girlfriend, and I were going back and forth to the other girl across on the American side, and I said I had this great idea that I would go into the immigration, and I would say that I wanted to go to on the Canadian side, the immigration, and wanted to go to America to my husband and give them his address and everything. Told the truth about his address. I should have given a false address, and I'd have maybe got my papers, or you know.
So what happened?
Well, they found me, and they put me in the slammer.
And then what happened?
Well, it was on a Sunday morning about, we hadn't got to bed till about 3 o'clock on that Sunday morning because we'd been at a party the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And they came around, the immigration officers came around, and Jess and I lived together at the time in a 2-flat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeannie was just a little bitty baby.
Mm-hmm.
And they came to the door and they asked for Isabel Smith, and Grandpa went to the door about 9 o'clock, and they had a uniform on and everything. And he said, "There's no Isabel Smith here." He knew right away. And he said, "Now, Mr. Smith, we know that she lives here. So if you don't want to get into trouble, I would suggest that you just tell the truth." So he knew that he better. So he came in. He says that she's still in bed, you know, and she has to. Where are you going to take her? And he was outside on the landing asking all these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "We're going to take her downtown to the immigration office." He said, "Well, you'll have to wait for her because she has to get dressed and she has to eat something. That's one thing. So you can come and sit here if you want, or you can wait in your car, but I will bring her, but she will come." So he comes and he says to me, "Get dressed real quick and go down the back way and go down through the alley and get in a cab and go right downtown to such and such a, Hudson's or something. I'll meet you down there." I says, "No, can't do that." I says, "I've got to take it now." I said, "I'll go with you." She goes, "Go down there and do what I tell you." I said, "No, I don't do it." So,
Weren't you scared?
no, I just knew it was going to happen someday. But
Were you afraid they'd make you go back?
oh no! In the first place, Debbie, I had my fare booked to go home to Scotland.
Oh, that's right.
I was going.
Yeah,
I
because
was-
you weren't happy and you wanted to go back.
No, I was going home to work
Oh,
in Dakota.
Oh, you were?
Uh-huh. And so was
Now-
my sister.
Now, I thought that you were going home because your mom was sick.
No,
That was the second time.
I was going home because my sister had been drowned. And I was going to wait in Dakota. And that was a chance to wait in Dakota for a year. You're supposed to wait for a year,
Mm-hmm.
see. And maybe if you're lucky, you would be sooner. It wouldn't be a year, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister Jess, she was legally in the country too, you know, like she was in the same boat as me.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was going home with me, but she didn't have the money, so I was waiting for her. See, I was working at the time.
Now, in Detroit,
Yeah, and where Grandpa worked. I
What-
worked for a year and a half.
what'd you do there? On
Assembly.
assembly parts or
Yeah,
something?
assembling a carburetor, a
Hmm.
Dodge car. I loved it. But because I was saving up money, see, because I wanted to go home. And so they took me down to the immigration and they kept me in all night. And Grandpa was running around like a crazy man. And he knew a guy named Smith too, but no relative, that just about knew everyone. In fact, he was very friendly with the immigration chief. What do you call him? The chief immigration officer,
Mhm.
Mr. Doig. He was a nice man when I really met him. But I was in jail for a night in the detention home. I thought I was going to die. It was the first time I lost my courage. And it's way up high, and I was standing on this bed looking down, and the cars were about this size. That's how high we were. Looking down at the traffic.
Were you in with a bunch of crazy people or just normal folks?
Yeah, went up in the cage, an elevator that looked like a cage, and streetwalkers and everything.
Mhm, that's what I meant. A bunch of criminals,
Streetwalkers, mostly.
mostly
like
streetwalkers.
these furs that they throw with their shoulders in these days, and painted faces and everything. And the next morning, the matron was so very nice, and she reminded me of my sister Rachel. She was very good looking, you know, blonde and pretty complexion and big, tall, you know.
Mhm.
And my grandpa, he was talking to her and saying that it was all a very big mistake that I shouldn't be kept in overnight because I had my ticket to go home to Scotland. And she said, well, Mr. Doig isn't here, or else he's out of town and we don't know where he is. We tried to get in touch with him
Mhm.
because this other Smith, Dick Smith, he was running all over town trying to get me out. And even I got just out under the line the next day, 4 o'clock, and we all went up to Mrs. Knowles, if you know one of the Forbes,
Mhm.
Al's Auntie Liz. You would never met her.
Vaguely.
Yeah.
Lizzie, I remember Lizzie.
Well, we went up.
Right? Is that Lizzie?
Well, her name was Liz, really.
But was that the same as the Lizzie that we used to see when I was little?
No,
That's a different Lizzie.
Yeah, that was.
You're still in the immigration. They couldn't find Mr. Doyle, is it?
Doig.
Doig? So what happened?
Well, they put me in for the night in a cell, and I had a beautiful black dress on, and it was the very latest, you know,
Mhm.
with a long, tight sleeve, and I looked at this bed, and I said, I'm going to sleep in that bed. I'll lay on it. I sat on the edge of that bed all night, on the edge. I was afraid it would be bugs. I've always been afraid of creepers of any kind. And I just sit there, and then I climb up and look down at the town again. But I didn't cry much. I cried a little.
Cried a little.
Yeah.
I guess so.
So the next morning, the cell doors open, and this little funny-looking woman comes, tough, really tough, and she threw a broom in. And she says, sweep yourself. And I says, you sweep it. I'm going to be out of here pretty soon. She says, that's what they all say.
Wow. Did you sweep it?
No way.
So what happened?
Well, pretty soon, I think I didn't get breakfast, but I didn't eat.
You didn't want their food?
Oh, no way. And so pretty soon Grandpa came, see, and then I was called out, and we had to go down and meet this officer. Now, it wasn't Mr. Doig, because he hadn't come in yet.
Uh-huh.
But this was getting on to be about 11 o'clock or something in the day. And I had to go through an awful lot of red tape and sit in this office, excuse me, and sit in another office and sit in another office and all this business. And then eventually we got to see Mr. Doig, and he said I should never have been kept. I should never have been kept overnight. They just didn't do their job right, he said.
Mm-hmm.
You did tell them that you were booked to go back to Scotland? I said, yeah. Grandpa, he'd stick up for me. I felt sorry for him. He was going through more than I was. He was running around all day. That was Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And I got out just before they closed. They closed at 4 o'clock and just got under the wire, just got out. And when we went home to Liz's, they all started to sing. It was a very popular song in those days, the Prisoner Song. That was the name of it. I wish I had someone to love me, someone to call me their own. And I was crying, and I said, don't sing that song, please. So that was that. But that night, that day that they came for me, on a Sunday, well, Jess, my sister Jess and Ab and the little Jeannie, they got out of that flat so fast, it wasn't funny.
They flew by quickly.
Yeah, they went over to stay with Liz. They wouldn't stay there, they were afraid.
Sure.
And the officer said, who's the baby belong to? And Grandpa says, that's friends of ours who stayed the night,
You want to stop?
Well, that's that episode.
This is August 15th, 1985, and this is Grandma telling a story about camping at Point Pelee.
Before your father was born, we used to go with a crowd of people on holidays and have a weekend over there.
Would you take tents?
Yeah. Oh, we used to have a wonderful time, And so this time I think your dad was just about 4 years old or something like that. And Pat was, how much older?
Probably was 8 or 10.
Yeah. It's his cousin. And that's when they both really were very miserable with that. The peat was burning under the ground, and there's nothing but smoke. And we were expecting, you've heard us talk about Billy and Peggy McNeil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were coming. So I said, we can't wait for them. They'll understand, because you could see the smoke away, and when we did find them, they seen the smoke from Essex, coming through Essex. So we met them on the road out, the road that leads you right into the park.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good that we met them. I said, it was a beautiful day. And I said, we can't go home. Let's go look for a place, Mm-hmm. So we took this highway that wasn't used much. I think maybe you would remember it. It runs from Leamington into Kingsfield.
Right.
Yeah. Number 3 or something,
Mm-hmm.
call it. And there was a couple of young boys, about young teenage boys, and they were riding little horses, not ponies, but small horses. I don't know what kind of horses.
And the kids looked very well fixed, you know. So we stopped and asked if they knew anyone around that had places, and any place that we could camp. And they said no, but maybe Mr. Clifford would know. And so they told us where to find Mr. Clifford with this house, and described the house and everything. So he knew all right. And here it was a place that, like, you've got to go through fields, and then you come to the edge of the fields, and then down there. And that was this thing I saw above the valley. I said, I never saw such a beautiful valley. It was just beautiful, you know. And I said, oh my gosh, there was a tent there. We didn't go to Mr. Clifford. I said, there's a tent there too. So we'll go to that house. And here it was Mr. Clifford was this woman's uncle. So he'd never let the place out for camping before. Well, he seemed to like us. And he said that we could camp if we wanted to. We told him about the fires at the park, and he said, yeah, we could smell them from here. They could, but we couldn't, you know, because we'd been right in them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the start of camping at the little place, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to camp at Point Peely quite often on the holiday weekends. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
national holidays here.
4th of July,
Yeah.
Labor Day, Memorial Day.
Yeah, I was saying to Kathy, I said, why don't you go over and go to the national park, Point Peely? You'd like it. She said, never thought about that. I said, I'm sure it must be still good because they look after the places over there, you know.
Well, then when did you build the cabin?
Oh, not long after.
Who built it?
Some friends of Grandpa's in the shop, and they were Swedes. And we used to visit them at, what's the name of it, Harson's Island?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to visit them off and on. They used to invite us, you know. And, but I wouldn't have liked to live there.
Too isolated.
Living on top of each other too.
Oh.
I never liked that, you know. So when we got to Mr. Clifford, he said when we asked him if we could ever be able to build a place on there, he said he would think about it and he'd let us know. But he could never sell us the ground or the land, is what he said, because if he ever sold it, it would be the whole lakefront. And we said we didn't want a whole lakefront. There's no lakefront today. There hasn't been for years and years. It's all gone into
erosion.
Oh, really?
The cabin went into the gully it fell down in. I went when I was in high school, and we saw the old propane stove and the ice box down in the gully.
Yeah.
Well,
It would head out.
the gully was here, the lake was here, and
If this was the lake, the shore, there was a pretty steep grade, and we had steps going down. And then the cabin sat here, and then there were other cabins of their friends that had built. Other friends from Scotland that had built.
Yeah, well, the people who were down there were people that we knew.
Right. Yeah.
I always asked Mr. Clifford, would you allow another one down here? She said, if it belonged to you, yeah.
So what you did is, did you lease the land from him then? You paid him rent?
No, we paid him rent.
Rent. And then it was probably in the early 60s that the erosion was so bad, and then by the late 60s it had fallen in.
the
So
lake
the
still
cabin
there?
was here, and then the land kept going back further and further, and then this huge gully ended up here, and the cabin went in. It's on Lake Erie,
Big lake.
the Great Lake,
Oh.
Lake Erie.
Half the cabin went in
where-
and they couldn't save it, and so we just never built another place on it. You know.
Those were good years at that cabin.
Oh, yeah, and the nice people around, you know, that we had. There,
Close-knit.
we all got along good, and we went on top of each other. Most of them were through the woods.
Mhm. You had to take a little trail, a little footpath to get to each cabin. And the cars were parked way up at the farmer's field. You
There
couldn't
were
see in
3
cars. I could
Canadian
see where
families
woods.
and 3 American families.
I could see where the woods, the cabins, and then the lake. And that was it. And it was way up on this cliff. So you saw the water for miles.
Are we going to show?
And
What
then
time is it?
there used to be
7:40
trees.
is the show.
the trees that were close to the brink of the where we were on the flat part. They all went into the lake eventually.
Yeah.
Great big maple trees.
Well, let's stop for now.